So we have a pretty eclectic, diverse group of people up here. We're going to zigzag through a lot of topics, probably enough to get 2 seminar sessions worth. If we can go down the row and have each of you introduce yourself, where you're from, and what you do.
Jason Bernstein, Managing Director of HAWKEYE North America, based here in Chicago.
Bob Carzoli, President, Program Productions, also based here in Chicago.
Jim Corno, Jr., Senior Executive Producer of Events at Comcast SportsNet Chicago.
Gerard Hall, CEO and founder of SMT. We're in Durham, Jacksonville, and London.
And Larry Meyers, I'm the VP of Content and Executive Producer for the charter-owned Time Warner Cable SportsNet and SportsNet Deportes and SportsNet LA, Los Angeles.
Great. So the topic is big time look on a budget, making the most of your resources. You're going to hear us talk a lot about different resources, different types of models of low-cost productions, but also different technologies that advance the industry. And I really think that the value out of this will come from people in this room having time to ask questions. So please jot down thoughts or notes as we go along. It would be great to have some time at the end for Q&A, either with the people here, or if you want to ask questions where they can ask things of each other, that would be exciting. You've got 2 regional sports network executives, and then 3 people who provide products or services for our industry. And I want to start out with Bob from Program Productions. Tell us a little bit about how your service fulfills the title of the panel, Big Time Look on a Budget, Making the Most Out of Resources.
Well, the first thing that usually happens is we get a call from a customer and says, lower your price. So that's how we handle the big time look on a small budget. You know, I think what we're starting to see is this whole new generation of broadcasting, which is both the at-home, the small form factor trailers, smaller trucks. And so the size of our crews have certainly started to diminish, and we're having our people do more with a little bit less. There's been a little bit of a blurring of a line. We're seeing that across a lot of bases where your TD is also your director. Your bug box operator and your graphics person are in the same human body. Your replay operator on a Dreamcatcher or an EVS is also your producer. And so we're really working with our clients to try to find solutions that will help lower their costs. And I think lastly, we've done an enormous amount of work over the last couple of years, both in some partnerships that we have and in some internal work we've done on finding kind of that next generation of young people who maybe are a little bit more technologically savvy, who are willing to work for maybe a little less money, and who are local, so that we're not necessarily putting people on a game to do, we're not putting people on an airplane to do a high school basketball game. We're not putting people on an airplane or paying mileage and per diem for a guy to drive to Creighton to do University of Nebraska at Omaha versus Creighton game in the first week in November.
So one of the things that I know you are starting to look at is where you can also help blur the line between above and below the line crew positions. I'm just old enough to have learned a little bit under Arnie Harris, and I remember him doing a Cubs game and literally betting on horses while he was directing.
That's very true.
So you never knew what 2 1/5 meant. Was that a camera or? But he played a producer-director role, right? It was a different truck production when FNF and Arnie were doing things at Wrigley. So what are you doing along those lines where it's not just about the crew that's below the line, but also above, and how that blurs?
Well, yeah, listen, I think that our customers are driving that. You know, our customers say we have $10 to spend on production. And if I have a really good TD who is sat next to quality directors that work for, guys like Mike Conley and Larry and some of the other people in this room, how far away is that? And how many directors have started as TDs? And it's an opportunity now for that guy to, instead of paying him $10 to do the game, we pay him $12 to do the game, and now he calls his own show and he punches his own buttons. And so I think those are the kind of things that the lower end spectrum is requiring us to be able to do. And, quite frankly, a lot of the technicians find it favorable. It's an opportunity to kind of go in, make a little bit more money on a show that may not even necessarily been covered 5 years ago. No deference to the truck people in here, but, sometimes guys like working on smaller form factor trucks because the out takes 20 minutes instead of an hour and a half to bring the Expando in and get all the equipment put away.
Jason, on your end, for your product, HAWKEYE, again, how do you fulfill the title of the session, Big Time Look on a Budget?
Well, we're just the tennis guys, so that's, no. HAWKEYE is, many people know us for the tennis role and officiating, but we have innovation, which is creating other things that maybe haven't been created for broadcast enhancements. But notably, we also have a low-cost production solution. And we'll be producing Wimbledon outer courts starting next week with a single operator, no camera operators on the court, and single operators in a remote location. We've taken that model to other sports, rugby, ice hockey, college basketball, or basketball, and we're able to kind of create a hybrid there where you're reducing some of the load of the total number of personnel involved. You're also in an IT platform, so you can maximize your opportunities to add in other layers of broadcast enhancement. So virtual reality, or virtual signage, excuse me. We can add in, I'm sure Paul Hawkins long-term would love to do virtual reality, by the way. But the idea of adding in layers of technology that would otherwise perhaps be another upsell or another cost in a traditional production environment is just a simple addition in our IT platform. We can slave cameras together to focus on specific parts of a court or the playing field to be able to perhaps reduce a camera position or have a camera position manned by a remote operator in a remote location to do multiple cameras if it's an opportunity given the playing field. So there are lots of different conversations that we can have with clients really based upon their needs. And in that IT platform, we can create for them. We can automate replays based on their needs. Do they want a 3-second automated replay or a 5-second replay of that same camera behind live play? So again, it depends on all the needs and the changing of personnel that was mentioned. So various personnel roles can share, and we can blur that line by design. But it's one of those things where it's really what the client wants, and the goal is to really amplify the existing workflow, but use a slightly different production model to do it. It's not about dramatically changing the landscape of the workflow, but really kind of making the dollars go further with really efficient and ease.
So you mentioned you're doing tennis. What's next for this room in terms of which type of sport or sports network are you looking as the next 6 to 9 months?
So we're currently also delivering the Pro Rugby League, the new rugby league in the U.S. now. That's currently on One World Sport and being streamed on the internet as well. But we are looking at high school sports, which I think are germane to many of the folks in the room here. We're looking at regional teams that are also relevant to the folks here. We're sport platform team agnostic. We're feed agnostic as well. Whether it's a house feed coming in addition to a feed that we would go out and shoot and acquire ourselves, we can blend all of that together. So we're really partner agnostic as well in terms of national, remote, regional, or even international clients who might have business here in the U.S. To extend their reach.
Gerard, SMT, you're a scorebug company, but you're trying to do something to hit the sweet spot of big time show on a budget. Walk us through what you've got.
Well, thanks. Excuse me. Thanks for that. We're a little more than a sport bug company, but I appreciate that. We have, if you look at the phrase, just big time look. I mean, the fact that it involves the word look it kind of hits our sweet spot. So, the idea of the evolution of, if you look at scorebugs through time, we created the first ones, and we, in our sort of evolution of all the different technology from the graphic presentation of 3D animations, 3D moves, light flares, et cetera, and that all evolving. But when you get in the truck, and depending on the size of the budget of the show, any given production, you would have a dedicated graphic source of a bug, possibly 1, 2 CG devices with CG operators for each one, maybe 2 font coordinators for each one, and depending on the budget of the show, that's fine. But I think for everybody in this room, the traditional model of what is going to be graphic presentation moving forward is going to have to get a little more flexible. Our goal at SMT was to create, well, let's create a device that's not just a score bug. One of the things that we observed is even in those high budget shows, if you use one of the things we have internally we call our usage chart, which is basically a timeline of the show from on air all the way to off air, vis-a-vis the event, et cetera, what's going on the field or the court. And as we looked at that analysis, we determined, my gosh, we're not getting paid enough because our bug is on the air, virtually, the entire time. And if you actually do a count of how many insert package graphics are coming out, it's not that many. So the idea of, it's an awful lot of expense for a low-budget show to contemplate, traditional producers with their traditional sort of lucky rabbit sort of having how many graphic devices need to be available. So we looked at that as an opportunity to come out with a device, our next generation sports CG I mentioned earlier, that is fully dual channel and can support a full CG package, an insert package on one channel that is being controlled by the switcher, the keying by the switcher, whereas the constant keying of the bug out of the one box. And then going beyond that, that's just the look side of it, is, well, then who operates it? All right, can it be done, depending on the sophistication of the show and the type of show, can all the graphic production be accomplished by a single operator? Well, there's some shows where it just times out pretty well for that because you're going to start the show, you got a couple little locators, et cetera, on the insert package, and then you're into score bug land, and then data's driving all the slide outs from the stats. You can pretty much come back from break, halftime, whatever, and do a couple more inserts. One operator that's not overloading that operator. Higher end shows, you could overload an operator. So we also created flexibility so that someone back at the mothership at the studio can actually be fonting the show. The device is in the truck, and someone else can be controlling that second channel. So it can be remotely controlled by a second operator. Similarly, on the scoring side, it's highly integrated, so any scoring or input information that's coming into the device could be controlled by a dedicated operator. It could be tied into official scoring, depending on if the official scoring is fast enough for your show. And if it's a low-budget show, a single person can keep up with the scoring information. So a lot of flexibility on the scoring input side, on the graphics publishing side, and then the fact that it's dual channel. And the look, there is absolutely zero fall-off and compromise. That device has done the Super Bowl and can do high school football. It's the same device. So creating that level of flexibility of how any RSN might want to use it in terms of mothership, you guys are calling it at-home production, controlling device. You could literally be in the bar, looking at the show and controlling the graphics. It's that level of a remote control, if I can say it that way.
Which means your operator literally could be in pajamas in their basement on the internet.
Absolutely, the operator could be there, yes. And similarly, particularly with the social media integration, you could be integrating any social media content and curating from a central location. I think one of the key themes here is traveling people. That's one of the biggest expenses on a production is bodies, right? How many bodies and flying them in, per diems, et cetera. That's one of the biggest line items. So not that the goal is to eliminate all bodies, but the idea is, okay, let's be very, very efficient about those dollars that are being spent and to create a very flexible device that can give you the big-time look. You would not be able to distinguish that high school football game and that look from the Super Bowl in terms of its graphic presentation. Right. That was our goal. That's
great. The the change in what has really been talked about a lot here that we want to focus quite a bit of our remaining time on deals with the model of either at home compared to a smaller truck that can do a low rev or a secondary, tertiary sport, because there's really a couple of different models out there. Larry, you've spent some time with the at-home model for WNBA and MLS. We've talked a little bit. NESN had done something over the past few months with spring training, and we continue to pilot the live view cellular bonded model during minor league this summer. But you've got quite a bit of experience with two different types of sports and teams with at-home. Walk the group through what your successes were and what you found that you needed to change. And what you did, because I'm not sure the room even knows.
What we did is we took several of our road packages, specifically for these cases. I think we talk about our WNBA Sparks road games, of which we have a dozen, maybe, or that's about the right number, and then road MLS soccer games, also our road packages. We do them a little differently. The MLS is more of a hybrid, taking the home truck feed and augmenting it with certain equipment of our own, cameras and audio and so forth. And then the WNBA Sparks is a 100% road game that we do from the studio at our headquarters in El Segundo. We're using a vendor, ProShow, which some of you know. Pac-12 has worked very closely with them over the years for these, and it works. I mean, the bottom line is it works great. The bottom line is if you have the right equipment and people at the show end, and you have the right work and configuration at your studio end, then you basically have a 100% fully functional truck at your home studio. You have everything you have in the truck. You have all your cameras, all your tallies, all your PLs, all your IFBs, all your talkbacks, all your monitors going back. There's nothing missing.
How are you handling the transmission, both the video and communication, IFB, all that?
So the key to any of these, whether it's at-home production or anything else, I think what the story is really about, the at-home story is really about, that's taken up so much of the time already today, is really about the changes and the advances in connectivity. And that's really what brings us to where we are today. The technology, the venue end technology to do at-home has existed for a really long time. There's really no magic there. It's the cameras we know. Announcers are, and the trend seems to be very highly toward having announcers at site at the at-homes. I think a lot of people have experimented with it both ways and found that that's better for a number of reasons, some of them technical, some of them partnership relationship. In our case, we found that our partners really cared about having the announcers at site. That led us to do the games that way. I think Pac-12 has learned a similar lesson, and I don't know, I'm sure some of my colleagues here have as well. But that's really all we have. We have producers, directors, graphics operators, replay operators, audio mixers, and every position in the truck with the exception of the A2s and the stage managers at home.
And you know, those lower revenue sports mean that you probably are forced to look at cost reductions. So percentage-wise compared to a traditional method, how much percentage-wise do you think you're saving on at-home compared to if you'd just gone out with a full truck and crew and not done anything?
And without getting into the weeds, and you have to look at how you're allocating your fixed assets. So there's a lot of different ways to sort of do the financial analysis. And Gerard, Stacy, and I were talking about this a little earlier. He's really been with his hands on the wheel on this. I'd say the give or take 30%, and sometimes it's give and sometimes it's take, is probably the sweet spot in this. I think the way that you use connectivity plays a big role in it. What kind of connectivity you use plays a big role in it. How much equipment you have and who you're using as a vendor.
Are you saying it's a 30% reduction, or are you
Correct.
saying it's 30% off?
Sorry, it's 30% off. Yeah.
Good. Jim, from your end, you've got a little different model as your primary way of doing spring training and some other games where you're not just looking at home, but you're saying, you know what, there might be a different way to go about producing a big-time looking show, Cubs, spring training, White Sox, on a more affordable budget with, unlike Larry, where he's got some low revenue production monetization challenges, you're trying to go to volume when you're looking at how to do your events, and instead of at home, you've taken a different approach. Why don't you walk people through what you're doing?
Yeah, about 3 or 4 years ago at Comcast SportsNet, we kind of looked at our spring training plan where we were doing, at the time, about 7 shows every March. And, we did a few things. First of all, instead of spreading games across the month, we jammed them all together to try to keep the crews working. And then we found an option through Rush Media, who's here today. Tim, thank you for joining us. Where they've designed these trailers that are full HD. It's not all the same equipment that we use in our normal regular season broadcast, but we were convinced that it would look as good, and it has. There are certainly some compromises in the number of people we have in the trucks. Where you normally have a producer and a director, we have one person, and then we use the stage manager to sort of help traffic drop-ins as a sort of second producer. Our tape room is now one body for these games. I know there's 8 sources to this replay device that they have, and I think I talked to our director, and he likes to do 5 ins and 3 outs, so we get pretty much everything we need for a spring training baseball game. Our graphics machine is the same vendor, it's just a different level, so some of the animations look a little different. But really, the cameras look beautiful. It's live, it's from site, the announcers are there, they're interacting with the players before the games, which is what is important to them. And we've cut our production costs, just from truck and crew standpoint, pretty much in half. Now, it's not a model that I personally would endorse for some of our bigger games, just because it's, I like to use the analogy, the monkey playing 5 instruments at once. It's kind of, there's a little bit of that going on where guys are doing multiple things. And to expect, as many as 40 sponsored elements to run in a game where you're editing packages every inning is possible, but probably so are embarrassing situations that might come from pushing that crew too hard. But I think from a spring training standpoint and the expectations of a clean broadcast and everything looking HD and beautiful, it's a great option for us.
So saving 50%, are you pocketing it or doing something with it?
No, well, the model has allowed us to do, when in the past we were doing 7 games, now we're doing 16.
Right.
So.
This is a chance for you guys to jump in anywhere in this conversation, so I'm going to open it up to whoever wants to talk to our group. I've got a few more things I can go through, but this is such a pivotal point right now where people are looking at home through 2 or 3 different methods of transmission, different vendors up here that are trying to provide solutions to get the costs down, to increase the volume. What kinds of things do you want to know from people who are doing the productions or looking to hire products and services? Yep.
In terms of production automations, I know everyone kind of has their own unique format for that. What one thing that you all are doing really has kind of helped increase the viability of your production while also decreasing, just the busy work associated with it?
From our perspective, we're able to, we talked about reducing overall support or manpower, and that's not necessarily the goal, especially when we're talking to unions and things like that. But the reality is we're able to, the better way to look at it is free up people to do other things. There are roles in the traditional production environment that, candidly, they're not every second of every production, there's something to do. And this ability to kind of free up people to do the dual roles that we've talked about ticks a number of boxes. Obviously, it helps the production and it helps us be a little more streamlined. It also helps people become a little bit more well-rounded. We're not just talking about a TD anymore, which is a great role, and I don't really understand it. But and I do, but I don't. But it helps he or she can become, the director route if that's where they want to go, or also manage replays, whatever the function is that it requires in that environment. So for us, the automated part is really maximizing the people we brought. However, whatever the investment is, really maximizing that investment with the personnel.
Larry, viability of the production, given the different model and different crewing? What have you run into?
Viability-wise, I think we have found that we have lost very little, if anything.
Right.
I mean, that's not, I think if we were afraid of losing things, we wouldn't be having the conversation, or if we were losing things. The presentation we're putting on the air is at a very high standard. That standard continues to grow. And at the same time, we're utilizing production models where appropriate that are certainly non-traditional as we've known them over the last several decades in this business. So we're having this conversation because it's viable. I think what we're finding, sort of getting back to the transmission and connectivity side, is we have very extensive studio-based pre- and post-game productions. The ability to be connected to the site in a bi-directional, multi-path manner at a better price point, really allows us to improve the product and lower the price. We have people who can do things at home, big show, little show. We have the ability to send things from the truck to the studio in advance. We have the ability to send, archival or edited or graphically created items from our studio to the truck during the game for use. Those are the things that are new and better and cheaper.
Bob, what do you think of when you hear that?
Well, I mean, I agree. I think, so we did all the gym's spring training games in Arizona, and we had to go to our union partners down in Arizona. My brother's a partner in my company, and he's a longtime network level camera operator, and what we hear and what he likes to say is that we're kind of at this tipping point, almost as when Mobile TV Group and Fox started to move into the dual arena, and every technician in the world, had a picture of Phil up on a dartboard, and he was throwing it at, darts at it, and saying, you're ruining our business by only having 3 camera guys, and we're sharing resources, and obviously now for a lot of regional sports, that's kind of become a standard. And we're starting to see that now where, we had a lot of pushback. Tim will tell you, you put a network level camera guy out and he's not working on a huge Sony or a Grass Valley camera, and he's got to adapt to something that's a little bit different. There's a little bit of a learning curve, and there's a little bit of an acceptance curve. And so that's kind of the hill that we've had to climb. And as we've, again, explained to both the technicians in the field and our union partners, is that, you may not want this to happen. You may not like the fact that a replay operator has got 5 inputs, and, your agreement says that we need 2 operators because it's more than 4 inputs. Well, that's just not the way the world is going to work, and you really have a choice as a collective bargaining unit. You have a choice of realizing this is the sea change that we're getting in the low end of regional sports, or get left behind. And, I'd like to say, I think for the most part, the IBW and IATSE and NABIT have gotten behind this. And we're now seeing where they're involved with the Everts of the world and doing more training, partnering with us on those kinds of things. And I think, that is the reality, is that, we're not going backwards. If Jim's saving 50% on a game and Larry and his team are saving 30%, I don't imagine there's going to be a budget meeting where somebody says, okay, we've saved this money for the last 2 years. Now let's go back to the way things used to be. So.
If I could jump in for a second, kind of going back to the question that was raised, and then what Jim mentioned earlier, you gave the analogy of the monkey doing 5 different things or something, and that I sort of took that as a statement of you're somewhat willing to take a risk of overloading somebody. And so going back to the question about automation, that's one of the areas that we see as kind of vital to the success of this, and that would be in the graphics world, for example, data-driven graphics, so that a single operator, the rule set we've built that would allow for the particular sport, certain events happen, and then it auto-triggers what a selection of graphics that are available, so that someone can literally just be hitting a space bar and a very compelling graphic is being inserted, would help offload some of the that level of automation would help allow a much more efficient use of the resources on site. So areas of automation will help, I think, take the one-man band thing and make it much less risky, so that you're not really holding your breath thinking, well, it's a low-end show, I'm willing to take a certain amount of risk of overloading somebody for a glitch here or a glitch there that I would not find acceptable in a higher budget show. So.
Other questions? Yeah. Can we get a mic over?
Yeah, I know this is coming up in part of the next presentation, but you mentioned high school sports, and interested in getting your perspectives on how you're producing high school sports to make it cost effective given the approaches and technologies you're utilizing going forward.
In Chicago, the same group that does our spring training games is doing all of our high school product. And they actually assume the productions of them as well. So whereas for spring training, I'm sending a producer director, an associate producer, the talent are provided by the team. In that model, because of the volume, Rush Media has assumed all of the pre-production and execution on site responsibilities.
Other questions?
I want to jump in on that
Yeah.
for a second. I think there's going to be a lot happening in this high school or high school-like events, and talking about change, it's very possible that and what was mentioned at the last panel was lower prices means more content. It means less cost to the content that we're producing, but it means the opportunity to do more content for the same amount of money. The attraction for people to watch high school sports is, especially during the regular seasons, championships, playoffs are a little different, are to see the schools they care about, the kids they care about, the sons and daughters or nieces and nephews or whatever that they care about. And, the possibility of somebody producing a mass amount of 1 and 2, maybe 1, and maybe some technology we haven't really quite put our hands on yet, and sort of goes a little bit to what Jason's been talking about, to produce a high number of really small events that are very viewable. I mean, by high number of huge numbers compared to what we do now, is right out there. There could be a whole lot of games streamed simultaneously to a whole lot of people, and if we're not doing it, somebody's going to be doing it. We should be aware of that.
Yeah, I think the number I heard a few years ago was 50,000 games a year in the U.S. go untelevised, right? A lot of it's going to be high school, but it's a huge, huge volume that there's some interest in. So, other questions? So one of the things that, to follow up a little bit on where you're at with whether it's at home or the Rush Media model, are all crew positions equal? Meaning, are there some crew positions that you really need a higher skilled person no matter what, compared to something else where, whether it's high school, collegiate, spring training, you can kind of get away with something, right? So over the past year or two, people have found that they need video shaders, right? For a while it was, I think you can get by with auto iris. Then you had afternoon spring training games and the sun going down and shooting into the dugout, and it just didn't work out the way a lot of people thought. So a lot of people put video shaders back in. But what are the spots where you can economize, and what are the spots where you just don't, no matter what?
I think in the Rush Media, sorry, Bobby, in the Rush Media model, especially, everyone has to know what they're doing. You don't have the luxury of hiding a camera guy when there's only 4 of them. So, and these guys do a great job of that, providing us quality people who know what they're doing, and more than what they're normally expected to do. You know, in some of the bigger shows, while they have bigger audiences and you hope there are more qualified people everywhere, unfortunately, the reality is sometimes you do have a guy on a camera that you put on the telestrator camera because you don't trust him to get all the tight, you know, just the way you have more options for those people. On these smaller scale shows, you really have to make the most of everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the challenges that we see is, you know, on a bigger show, if there's a problem, you know, the typical camera guy clicks on his headset and says, "Send up truck EIC." And, you know, he stands there with a stupid look on his face until a guy that comes up that knows how to fix something shows up. And so I think in addition to being more broad-based, and in fact, I would tell you one of the big initiatives that we're doing is we're making sure that our TDs are also graphics people, they're also EVS people, and with a more technologically advanced group of millennials coming up, we're finding people and we're finding technicians who have the ability to do a lot of different things. I'll leave audio out for a second because that's a completely different animal. And so, yeah, it's not only do they need to know how to go and set up equipment, they need to know how to troubleshoot it. I mean, obviously, they're not going to be able to pull something apart, but they need to have the baseline knowledge to know here's the 8 or 9 things I do if my camera doesn't fire up, or if the graphics machine isn't working correctly, or if, you know, how to do a lot of things that normally, even on like the biggest shows, a lot of our technicians don't have to worry about. So I agree with Junior. I think that there's a lot of, I think positions are, always it's going to be the TD, it's always going to be the A1, you know, it's always going to be the senior video guys that are the most important. But I think the expectations on the lower end shows of what people can do and their ability to work together across that entire production platform, I think are far greater than they would be, than what I guess people would normally expect.
Training. I mean, you know, we came up at the beginning of the day today. Training, you know, we're not only seeing, and especially I think in the stronger union markets, but we're seeing an aging of the primary crews. It's harder for guys to want the new guys to come in when they want to get a call to work every day, and we're doing shows in which we are going to want to separate the better, more experienced operators into the packages that are the reason why we're here. You know, the NBA and baseball and hockey and large college packages that we're here for are going to get more attention. That's always going to be the case. But we're doing a lot more than that. And without training, we're going to be putting people in who shouldn't be sitting in those seats. With training and with, you know, supporting training programs like the one we heard about today, you know, that's going to just open it up for us to get the good product.
Jim and Larry, if you had to tell the people in this room what would help the most for the next step, either on the vendor side, boy, I'd love to get this to help me out, or with another regional or another network. Boy, I wish so-and-so would work with me more. We could do this for down the road for whether it's your P&L or budgets or whatever. What what are the one or two things over the next year that you can think of that would be great if this room could start to solve for what you guys are trying to do?
I've had to address this myself, and that is be willing to step out of your comfort zone a little bit and trust the people around you who have proven that they know what they're doing, and you know, use your resources as best you can, use your experienced people as best as you can. You know, Jumangio's been directing for us since the early 80s, I believe. I mean, since I was in high school. So here he is now on a show that he probably thought he'd never be on, but at the end of the spring, you know, he was holding a meeting with their crew and thanking them all and handing out awards. This guy was the most improved, this guy. So, you know, he bought in, and it works.
Larry, if you want to answer the same question, or I'll give you another, but what do you think the room could most help you with moving forward?
I think it's essentially the same answer that, you know, it wasn't that long ago we would sit in meetings either with this group or with others who would say, people from truck companies would get up and say, our ability to stay in business and thrive is based on our ability to sell you bigger trucks with newer technology at higher rates. And I heard that not that long ago. And that has changed fast and quickly and hard.
So smaller can be better?
Smaller absolutely can be better in many ways, and the concept that it's not a great show unless it's a bigger truck with a better crew or a bigger crew is certainly not the case anymore. And we just have to be open to all the changes. And on the vendor side, you know, there's a lot of work we can do together, but the paradigm has shifted.
Questions? We've got a couple minutes left. I'd love to get in. Are you signaling? Somebody has a question. Ron.
I'm trying to look down the road because my boss says I'm complicated, so forgive me for this. So we're trying to train young people. We're going to put them in an environment where they're at home, probably in these at-home, lesser, high-profile events, becoming very proficient at what they do. And now we start pulling those jobs potentially out of the truck. How will that impact hiring? How will it impact union? How will it impact everything that's related to personnel in the long run?
Bob, yeah.
I think that's a great question. You know, how do you start moving, you know, EVS and graphics and TD to, you know, El Segundo or to Charlotte or, you know, to some other remote location? And, you know, that's going to be a real issue on a going forward basis because I don't think there's a simple solution. You know, I'm curious as to whether, and I'm doubtful that there's ever going to be, you know, an at-home of an NBA game, a regular season NBA game, or a regular season NHL, or certainly a regular season NFL. So I think there's always going to be a need, but I think you're right. I think there's going to be a time in the not-too-distant future where you're going to start seeing labor shortages in some key positions. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I can train all the people that I want. You know, I'll give you a perfect example. We handle Memphis home and visitor show. There's 40 NBA games in a market all year. So no matter what I pay somebody, no matter how well I train somebody, the maximum amount of money that you can make working a network or a high-level regional show is limited by the number of events. And so I think those are a real world issue that we're going to have to address. But I also think that's part of what I talked about in terms of getting the younger people to be able to do more than one thing so that there's an opportunity for someone to add value. And I would tell you we have a lot of that happening now where I can put someone on a show as a TD or an EVS or a graphics operator. And Jimmy knows a couple of great young people that we use here in town. And that's how you create value. And that's how they create personal value. And so those are some of the things that we're doing. But I agree with you. I think, you know, that at-home smaller model is certainly going to change kind of the trajectory of people getting in and getting out of this business.
Another question?
Oh yeah, my question is for Jim and Larry. I'm curious, what's on your wish list as RSNs for your technology vendors to invest in their R&D to help you guys continue to do more with less?
Great question.
Well, I mean, we're up here talking about HD on a budget. I still have almost 300 events a year that have to look great, and we do use the more advanced technologies. And personally, I can't have enough super slow-mo in my games. I think it's fantastic. You know, there was a technology a few years ago I was introduced to by Mike Leary, one of our producers, that over in Europe they were using called Libero Vision, which now we're seeing in the biggest games, the Super Bowls, the NBA Finals. It's a technology that has some growing to do still. I think it's, you know, it's basically a 3D model for replays where you can spin, and it uses the multiple camera in sources to this computer to create a 3D model of everything on the court or ice or field, players included. So you can highlight a player and then spin around and see what he was looking at, and then spin around and see what the next guy who's going to get the pass is looking at. And as a former athlete and huge fan of sports television, I am jaw to the ground whenever I see this technology. And if it ever gets to a price point where we can use it, I would love to see that.
Guys, I want to keep us on. Oh, we got one more question? Yep.
Going back to your Memphis model, I'm part of the Comcast SportsNet in Portland. Same situation, one professional team, small market. We lose a lot of really good crew, say, because they don't know if the Blazers are going to make the playoffs. They'll make a commitment to TNT. So this is maybe for all the panel, but more in a crewing situation. Do you see guys and gals that have been around the block having more of a willingness to do a lesser show, maybe at a lesser price point, in a lesser position, to get more tonnage, for lack of a better term, so they can still work in their market, don't have to travel as much, but with a willingness to do a lesser show at a lesser price point, as opposed to having to get on a plane and fly to wherever and make that commitment to go on the road?
Not yet. Not yet. I mean, there's an old saying, the most expensive thing a person owns is their principles. And so we had probably, what do we have, 15, 20 camera guys that have done spring training in Arizona for the last 25 years that refuse to take 12, 15% pay cut to do more games. And, along the lines of what Jimmy said, we went from, 7 games, and I think we had 130, 140 spring training games. Someone could have had a very nice summer in the Valley of the Sun or in Florida, and some guys just chose to say, you know what, I'm not going to go work for below what I believe my market value is. So, but I think that's changing. I think we're starting to see more and more guys are recognizing that if I want to stay in this business, that there's going to be some A-level days, and I'm going to get paid A-level work, and there's going to be some B-level days, and I'm going to get paid B-level pay.
We saw it in the rugby. We saw some FSN Arizona guys who were available and knew that this was going to get produced one way or another. And part of this entire conversation is about communication. I mean, we're sort of dancing around various issues. These are different shows. It's a different mobile unit. It's different than what we've all traditionally come to accept. And it's not a lesser product, it's a different product. So when we have production folks come on site who are used to the 60-foot truck and the model where they come in and the set day is fixed and here's what we're doing, and it looks completely different because we're doing a set and shoot in the same day in a relative short amount of time that maybe would make people laugh, it's the reality. And so we need to have that conversation up front to say, hey, look, this is a different model. This is going to be a little bit different production. And by the way, from my days on the network side, it's a conversation on the network side. Guys, our expectations need to be just a little bit different. Again, not lesser, but it's just a little bit different of a model, and therefore we have to have the conversation. I think a lot of it we're not. I think maybe the production is getting hired, and they're showing up and doing it, and the crew is coming in, and there may not be a conversation with the crew, hey guys, this is different. This is a little different. And it's just a conversation sometimes that takes away some of the angst that has shown up. Because again, in some of our productions, we've had the guys and gals who've done big shows, and they come up and go, wow, it's actually some pretty cool technology now that we know how to use it, and it took them a game, and they're in, and it's an evolution, and it's a bit of a conversation.
Just to wrap us up, I think flexibility and partnership between regions and among vendors and the production producers are the two big takeaways. So great to have a forum like this. I want to say thanks to Bob, Jason, Gerard, Larry, and Jim for all your time. I'm going to go out that way.